Good morning, everyone. My name is Noah Bates, and today I'll be presenting Rooted in Memory, a proposal for the Toby Brantley Park that's grounded in identity and memorial and understanding of place. To begin, it was important for me to understand the history and kind of guide myself through that. But before I begin with that, I just wanted to take the time to acknowledge the people that have helped guide this project. To Professor Hay, thank you for your guidance. To the community, to Patricia with Southway, thank you all so much. Y'all have been an incredible inspiration and guidance throughout this project, and I didn't want to take this time and not acknowledge it. So thank y'all. So to begin, to understand the project, it was kind of essential to begin with its history. Toby Brantley served as a leader, as an advocate, and as a voice for the Churchill community, yet there was a space that had been dedicated to him but was never developed. This park responds to this decades-long absence of recognition, positioning the work not just as a design effort, but as cultural and civic responsibility. Moving forward to site context and analysis, the park is located on an 8.3 acre site within Eupora. Figure ground mapping reveals the site as a large void within a fine-grained settlement pattern around it. Centrally visible but programmatically absent. So an analysis of circulation, of solar exposure and orientation, adjacency, and edges showed the site as a great potential for access, but there was no invitation or identity within it, reinforcing this latent potential as an open and perfect civic space. Moving forward to SWOT analysis, this analysis kind of strengthened and reinforced that idea, displaying the different kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the site. This assessment kind of framed the project not simply as design work, but as a placemaking through acknowledgement. Moving forward to community insights. Engagement with residents and stakeholders kind of revealed that there was no visible recognition of Toby Brantley, but there was a gathering space that was needed and wanted for celebrations, for everyday use, for community events, etc. There's a need and desire for identity of expression and belonging through this landscape, as well as the desire for youth engagement, education, and particularly through recreation, ecology, and different things of that nature. So these voice-based priorities kind of redefine this project as a landscape of acknowledgement and visibility for me. So to begin with my policy statement. So with site limitations and community goals understood, the central challenge kind of emerged. Toby Brantley Park is an important but absent civic space within the Eupora community. Once that currently fails to kind of express local history, support gathering, or promote belonging, but the design problem is to transform this kind of undeveloped parcel into a functional symbolic landscape that honors legacy, strengthens identity, and supports everyday use. Moving forward to the vision. The vision is to create a public space where memory becomes visible, identity is affirmed, and gathering is really supported and reinforced through its design. Through intentional programming, spatial sequencing, and landscape expression, this is the vision. So to begin with design, I established 5 principles that kind of work to shape my design. These being recognition, so looking at honoring cultural history, gathering, looking at creating spaces for civic and casual use, belonging, looking at reinforcing identity and ownership, accessibility, so hierarchy of movement and visibility, and ecology, expressing place through native planting and habitat. These principles all kind of functioned as one large design filter throughout development. Moving to concept. So I began with conceptual diagrams. So my concept is rooted in memory. So this park is kind of conceived as a processional narrative, beginning in education, moving into connection, culminating in recognition and belonging. The conceptual diagram illustrates this progression, kind of framing movement and experience as the background of this design. Moving into case studies. So what is a realistic application of these kind of ideas? So these precedents across memorial landscapes, civic lawns, and narrative parks kind of informed 3 key strategies for me. Spatial sequencing through procession and threshold, symbolic materiality, particularly through interpretive seal, landscape as identity expression rather than background. These references kind of guided how meaning and movement come together and work as one in the environment. Moving to some sketches. So through a series of sketches, early exploration kind of tested diagrammatic arrangements, placement of axes and arrival, memorial zones and alignments, hierarchical spaces between plazas, learning gardens, play spaces, and the woodland, as well as framing of key sightlines and gathering nodes. So through iterations, sketches, kind of work to refine these into clear and kind of rhythmical orchestration of ideas in a way. Then moving on, I translated this into functional diagrams. So kind of evaluating a realistic application of all of those ideas in one. So adjacency and sequencing studies kind of confirmed this logic, moving from arrival to learning to the plaza to the memorial to play and into the woodland. So these diagrams kind of ensure that this circulation and program really work to support this narrative outcome and user experience across the site. Moving into the master plan. So the master plan organizes the site around the memorial axis and central plaza, kind of supported by a learning garden, this memorial zone central to the entirety of the park, a community amphitheater that's kind of situated directly adjacent to the memorial, where that memorial becomes more than just a passive space. It can transition into an active space where that kind of front space within it becomes a stage in a way, seated directly in front of the amphitheater. So this play space and woodland adjacent to an indoor recreation facility. So this structure kind of supports reflection, gathering, celebration, and everyday life across the entirety of the site, while also leaving breathing room, kind of reflecting and understanding that there's still a need for green space, that we don't need to cover a site in concrete and call it a day. There's ways to program and design thoughtfully and meaningfully without completely disregarding that. So then moving into my section, which kind of reveals how experience evolves from the south to the north of the site. It begins with the learning garden, kind of highlighting an ecological learning station, which then transitions into a central plaza, then transitioning into the memorial, into another sidewalk, into a plaza, play space, roadway, and back to the woodland. So this kind of moves into recreation and kind of arriving in that woodland area really works to reinforce how character use and meaning shifts across the site. Then diving into ecology. So creating an ecological framework kind of worked to strengthen the identity of place through this design. This learning garden really works to integrate layered planting, insect habitat, interpretive signage, and kind of different engagement spaces for children and people of all ages. So the planting schedule kind of reflects native species that are structured to support pollinators, as well as shade and seasonal interests. So kind of rooting this project in ecological and cultural sensitivity. Then moving forward, this is a rendering of that central alley and primary approach to the site. So this really is meant to communicate arrival and anticipation. So this alley guides movement and it terminates at this plaza that's kind of worked to situate a sculpture of Toby Brantley and kind of reiterate and highlight the importance of this space. So the alley kind of guides movement, it frames views and establishes this direction toward the memorial, while also reinforcing procession as this kind of narrative device in design. And then we have a bird's eye view, kind of guiding the user through what that space would actually look like with the memorial and the adjacent plazas. So this kind of works to illustrate that axis as an emotional and kind of symbolic part of the site, which ties back to the concept as a whole. The amphitheater lawn kind of as this main central gathering space and really highlight the spatial relationships between the plaza, the lawn, the panels, the statue, and circulation. So together they kind of demonstrate how design strategies can work to support visibility across the site, as well as belonging and activity. So moving into closing, working with the Churchill community has taught me that public space is relational before it can ever be spatial. So to the residents, thank you all for helping me frame an understanding of your lives, of the history, and thank you for welcoming me into that. It's meant the world to me. So understanding that recognition, that belonging, and visibility as core needs, not just as something that can go unnoticed. So it really helps me to reframe this work as a responsibility, not just as a kind of personal design exercise along the way. So I learned that landscape architecture is really a translation of voices into form that have meaning, memory, and kind of this method of creating spaces not just for, but with communities. So thank you all so much. It's really been a joy.